Thanks for coming on with me. I keep hearing all this talk that we have restored local control in education, and I didn't have a lot of time to really dig deep into what was happening at the federal level, but I know that you have been following what's going on. I'm wondering if you could explain to me, did we really gain back local control with the passage of the new federal law?
Actually, no. And it's actually, I tell people it was a brilliant marketing strategy to kind of come out over the Thanksgiving holiday and tell everybody, we're going to give you a big Christmas present that
Yay!
are, parental rights and local control. And a lot of our governors, unfortunately, bought into that marketing line. But in fact, right after the new Every Student Succeeds Act passed, President Obama issued a White House report that said that the new law cements everything that he did with executive action through waivers and race to the top. And so we know that those things were unconstitutional. And so what states have just agreed to was to codify into law what was unconstitutional to begin with. And my concern is that everything that's contained in this new law is just a complete dismantling of parental rights.
Well, how and why are parental rights so important, do you think? I mean, I feel like before I started looking into what was going on in education, I just trusted what the experts told me. And as I started to really study what was going on, all of a sudden I felt a little empowered and realized, hey, this is my job. And why do you feel that this is our job to be in control of what's going on with education as parents?
Mm-hmm. Well, we know our children best, and we know they're all different, and they all have such unique talents and abilities. And, local control has been something that Americans have touted for a long time, but I don't think that anymore very much. We think about what that truly means. And what it means to me is that parents have the natural right and responsibility to direct the educations of their children. And it really is urgent that more parents start taking that role seriously, because as we know, governments throughout history always grow and expand and take more and more power. And this president in particular has done that in every sector of the economy. So it kind of surprises me when people say, oh, we've restored local control for education, like the one area that he's not going to touch is going to be education. Yeah. It's not logical.
No, it's really not logical. And so Every Student Succeed Acts, how is it different or similar to No Child Left Behind? And does it have anything to do with No Child Left Behind? Mm-hmm. I just think a lot of people don't quite understand. I know over the course of a decade, a lot of educators, especially everyone across the board, seemed to understand that No Child Left Behind was a really bad law. And as we started fighting Common Core, a lot of administrators and teachers were under the impression that we got rid of No Child Left Behind. Mm-hmm. That's not really true. How, can you explain how these are similar and what it did to No Child Left Behind, this law?
And what I've learned, and what I've learned that a lot of people don't understand, and I try to simplify it, is that No Child Left Behind brought a system into place based on standards and tests and accountability. And it's called the federal tripod. And what it does is it actually starts dismantling local control, because families and children become accountable for their test scores to government bureaucrats. And then the funding starts controlling everything that happens at the local level to control what happens with test score outcomes. And so No Child Left Behind aggravated or caused problems because people were losing local control. Now, because of what President Obama has done to change testing systems and to digitize learning, mm-hmm. And to take over data systems in the states, it's just an elevation or an escalation of what we saw with No Child Left Behind. And that federal tripod is actually starting to just strangle out any free market system.
So basically, they'll be able to control the outcomes of what's happening in education, the federal government, I mean.
Right. What they did through Race to the Top was sort of lay groundwork with a testing takeover. They started 2 federal groups, testing groups, And they were actually operating kind of like business consortia that got together and said, let's make all tests interoperable and let's push all states into online learning. And then they started making regulations and changes to the big tests, the international test known as PISA, the NAEP test, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and then our state tests. And now what they're doing in our current legislatures is to get everybody onto formative online assessments, which means that children will be assessed chronically through online learning platforms.
And why do you think that's a problem?
It's just another way to hold children constantly accountable to test scores and outcomes. Again, making parents and families accountable to government for test scores rather than making the process of education about learning and just becoming a better person. You know, I remember when a good friend of mine that's on a local school board here told me that Utah didn't even have state standards until 1984.
Hmm.
We hear all the time that, oh, we have to have standards. We have to have standards. Well, if you look back before that time period, how did America build the greatest middle class in history? It wasn't because we had national education standards or state level education standards. It's because we had more of a free market, local control system that helped, and we believed more that education was about learning and becoming a better person than we did about test score outcomes.
Yeah. You know, it's really concerning to me because I see all across different, I can't think of the way I'm trying to say this, but I see all over the place different people talking about how our economy is horrible and the job, you know, we're going to have to start giving all of our jobs to people overseas because of the education, and that we really need to produce an education that will meet the needs of the workforce. And I think on the surface, a lot of people, if they don't really think about what this means, they might think that sounds good because they want their children to succeed. But my concern is that we're producing kids that they don't have the American dream. Their field of vision is limited to what a test or what data pool is telling them that they're capable of doing. And part of the reason why America was great is in addition to what you said, is because of the American dream, and people had this dream that they could reach to higher ground and that they could accomplish anything. And I really am concerned about the data, in addition with all the test scores and everything as it all comes together, that it will create such a narrow view for these children. And we're going to look like a European country where the kids are tracked and they're told what they're capable of being in life. And that's a huge problem.
Have you heard from people with personal experiences that kind of
yes,
have expressed that to you?
Yes. I have a friend who lives near me, and she has a twin sister who lives overseas, and her son, because boys don't typically progress educationally as quickly as girls, because they're tracked so young. By 6th grade, he was told he only had the ability to be an apprentice and he couldn't go on to higher ed as a young boy. And they spent their entire summer just stressing over what apprenticeship he could get, because if he wasn't able to land a really good apprenticeship, it would affect the rest of his life. And it would go with him forever. And he's not able to rise above that. And that is nothing like the America that I know. And if we start implementing these systems into America, we will be right there before we know it. Yeah. And I think that most people don't realize that.
You know, I gave a presentation recently about, and I shared that in Colorado, the governor just signed an executive order to align its education, certain parts of their education sector, to the workforce, and to change curriculum in real time based on market demands. And that is exactly where we're headed, that into a workforce tracking system rather than a learning and becoming the best person you can be, like the American dream.
I think one of the ways to stop this is to opt out of the testing. And also, like in our schools up here where I live, they give every student ACTs starting like in 8th grade. And I have let them take those, but I always opt them out of the personality test that's the beginning of the year. And I'll tell you why. Because before I started looking into education issues, I went into the counselor with my oldest son, who's now in college, and they started discussing with him what classes he should take because he was a freshman in high school. And they pulled out this chart that was given to us by ACT after he was administered a personality test. And they told him, so one of the classes we were considering taking was an AP US history, or it was an AP world history or something. And the counselor said this to my son: clearly, you are not going to be a history teacher. So let's pull you out of AP US history and put you in a class that follows your career path. And, it didn't occur to me at the moment what was happening until I started digging in and looking at what was going on with education. And then very clearly I realized that this was limiting him. Maybe
Yeah.
he does have a great interest in history. Maybe it's not his natural ability, but who am I to say he can't do that if that's what he decides to do? I
And
wasn't interested in history before. I wasn't interested in politics before, but I like them now, you know.
right. It stunts people.
Yeah.
Having a standard, excuse me, having a standard actually sets a ceiling. And then
Yeah.
that's what we'll shoot for. And, I heard from a Title I teacher who's taught for 25 years in a Title I school that her children that come from second language families, English as a second language, were being told they could no longer take elective courses because they're not testing well on
Oh,
the
no.
subjects. And she said, we are literally pulling the American dream away from these kids. And she says, it's just heart-wrenching to me because I know these families. I've been at the school for 25 years. I've seen the good people and the good hearts that they have. And she said, you know what? Some of my students that I never expected have become doctors. Some of those students have, are downtown in a bar band, but who am I to decide for them what their American dream is? And I think
So true.
yeah.
Well, we need to go, but do you have any advice for parents or a citizen that sees what's going on, maybe has some concerns, but doesn't know what to do?
Yeah, you know what? I would just encourage parents to go online and start Googling the Every Student Succeeds Act and look for articles that aren't touting the marketing lie that this restores local control, but Google their family engagement plans that are part of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Those family engagement plans are a sure way to bring us compulsory preschool and use data to control the choices of families and their children in education. And it really is urgent in my mind that families rise up and take their rightful place and say enough is enough. We will hold on to our American dream and you keep your test-driven model somewhere else.
I agree. Thank you so much, Jaquel, and thank you for anyone that's watching. We'll have a good day. Talk to you later.
Yeah.